Hello again, everyone.
Hello.
This is Ryan.
This is Alex.
I'm so used to introducing myself that I just wanted you to introduce me at least once, so that's why I introduced you first. So,
All right.
also, I feel as though you being the amazing person who needs no introduction.
Or
I
interruptions too, I guess.
I feel like you need all the interruptions purely because if I'm not allowed to interrupt you, I would cease to be. So that being said, you don't need my interruptions and that they benefit your health, but ultimately, yeah. This is a great start. Anyway, so we're here to talk about Survivor Winners at War, episode 13,
13. The penultimate, as Jeremy coined it.
penultimate episode, and oh my gosh, so much happened.
It was a lot of palpitations on my end. I felt like any cast member of the Golden Girls at any moment in time. I was overwhelmed, sometimes underwhelmed, but I was highly whelmed this episode. How about you?
I agree. I feel as though they did a decent job this episode and not just being like, hey, let us continue the narrative of how Tony wins this entire freaking game.
Yeah.
It's like, I felt like they did a better job of like explaining. We went from like Sophie, who was like, oh, I guess Sophie's the target, but they haven't talked about her much, so she's probably safe. And then she was gone. To Kim, who basically all we really got was why she was in the hot seat. And then they gave us all this false hope of other plans to get rid of other people. And then she went home. This episode, I felt like a reasonably good job of setting up and doing a visual kind of check in with the fans to be like, if this person goes, this is why.
Yeah, and
But overwhelmingly make it look like Tony's in control of everything.
I agree with you, and yet simultaneously, it felt like they were explaining how Tony is in control of everything. Um, maybe because I'm so used to the season having to read between the lines, and with as much as I've mentioned in the past of the season that there have been really big roller coaster episodes, this one clearly is the most because there was a lot of gaining hope and thinking, oh my God, is someone going to finally make a move? Someone finally going to make a move? And yet, two tribal councils in a row, we see not a single person targeting Tony or Sarah. And so, not to jump too far ahead of ourselves, but for as much greatness as we got from this episode, and I really want to spend some time talking about Michelle because there have been times throughout the season where I was like, I'm kind of impressed by this and I'm kind of impressed by this. And I think we finally have plucky Michelle, which is why her fans love her so much.
Mm-hmm.
And, for as much as we start to kind of see this underdog that, hey, maybe they're the one person that is finally going to actually dethrone the stronghold that Tony has on the game, nobody's looking at Tony or Sarah as a viable option for a vote. So it's a lot of, oh, maybe we will. And then, oh, no, we're at best, we're going to get Ben, which,
Right.
so.
I almost wonder, and I'm sorry to jump in, I feel as though the only possible caveat there is to that is maybe that is going on. We're just not seeing it.
And I think that's fair, and I think it's very, very valid.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, I feel like a player like Tony, we've already seen him tell Ben and Sarah about his idol. I don't think Tony's very good with secrets. When he had his super idol in his first season, a lot of people knew about it. And he kept talking about his bag of tricks, but a lot of players were aware that these things existed. So I have a hard time believing that people haven't leaked that Tony has an idol. So it is kind of disappointing to not see an attempt at flushing it. And on top of that, to see people thinking that Tony is a more viable fourth for their voting plans than other players in the game.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I do think in some ways, as much as I've been rooting for Sarah, I do think players like Sarah and Ben and even to Denise to a degree are doing that to themselves by not making them look like the viable fourth option for a vote. Whereas Tony is positioning himself in a spot where, yes, he looks like the ringleader to us in the audience and probably to the people in the game too. But people know from Tony's past in the game that he will make the move. He turned on Trish, who was his closest ally at Final Five in Kagayan. He will make the move. And if you have people like Sarah who are blatantly telling people, no, not going to do it, not going to do it, I don't believe you, then you got to go with what you can go with. So
yeah, it's interesting purely because I would like to think there's no way that what we're seeing of Tony in the last 2 or 3 episodes, for me, I refuse to believe that that's all that's going on.
Right.
I refuse to believe that's a fifth of what's going on, because whether people are actively throwing out, I refuse to believe that Tony won individual immunity 3 times in a row, and then didn't win it, and nobody brought him up.
Right.
If that's actually what happened, then so be it, and I'm obviously wrong. But I feel like with it being an all-winner season, it happened, what was it? When Ben went on a roll, anytime he was vulnerable, it's like, we need to get him out. Mike Holloway, when he finally didn't win immunity, he got votes and obviously used the idol to save himself. It's like when someone goes on an immunity run, that's always something people are going to bring up as far as, hey, let's get rid of this person. So yeah, I think if Ben and Sarah are also in the final 3 with Tony, assuming that's the final 3, I know Sarah is just fuming, because I'm sure just as much as we see Tony working on Jeremy to vote out Kim, or just as much as we see Tony working on Michelle to make sure, like, hey, you're going to vote this way and this way. And even though he keeps lying to Michelle and saying where the votes are going to fall, Michelle keeps believing him. I would like to think that Sarah and possibly Ben are as much in there helping navigate all that as well. And the narrative we seem to be getting is that Tony's kind of the ringleader of that. But we don't necessarily know that Tony is the ringleader in that. If for whatever reason Sarah was not doing that at all and she won, they're doing a very interesting job of painting that picture. But yeah, that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, that's fair. So I guess let's start at the beginning of the double episode, because there's a lot to cover. So we get back to Tribal. We know that Michelle voted in the minority, but still gave Jeremy her advantage, and then Jeremy ended up not playing it. She kind of plays it off. Everyone said it was you, so I didn't know what to do. And Jeremy's sort of in this position right now where, like, every single person has betrayed him, ironically, except for Tony. Like, I feel like Tony is the one person who really has actually been able to keep his word with Jeremy. So we really don't know where Jeremy's headspace is at, but he gives Michelle the 50-50 back and says that he's not going to allow his game to come down to a coin flip, which I think is some interesting foreshadowing, because I get it, but at the same time, I'd rather my game comes down to a coin flip than my game come down to I have no chance at surviving and I lose.
I mean, I get that, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. I guess for me, the difference would be if you gave me an advantage in the game and I wound up not using the advantage, wouldn't you expect me to give that advantage back?
No. I think it's absolutely right that Jeremy did it, but his confessional, he didn't say it to Michelle. His confessional was like, I'm not using a coin to save my game. Yeah. And ironically, and we'll get to this later, at Tribal Council, when Michelle plays it, he's kind of like, please play it for me, sort of like with his eyes, which I just felt like was funny editing, because if he really felt like my game isn't going to come down to a coin flip, is he making those faces?
Well, in that moment, I was sitting there going, is that actually what went down? Because I'll never forget in All Stars when Kathy says she's going to give her immunity to Lex, and then she doesn't, and Lex is sitting in the rain like, I remember reading both Kathy and Lex being like, Kathy told Lex that she was not going to give that immunity necklace, she was going to keep it for herself. But the edit was to make us believe that Lex was surprised by this.
Right.
So that's why I'm always that person like, is that actually how that went down? Because I have questions.
We also get this really interesting moment early on where Cops R Us is sort of talking, and they're both kind of mentioned like, oh, well, like, you screwed me over in the past and I screwed you over in the past, so we'll see what happens this time. And I feel like that was some interesting foreshadowing. I'm like, are we going to see Tony and Sarah turn on each other at some point this episode? And we had plenty of, like, suspenseful moments where, like, it's like, oh my God, is this the moment? Is this the moment? We'll get to those, I guess, as we go through.
Here's my question for you, and if we bring it up later, that's fine. If for whatever reason, whether in this episode before any of the vote outs or even in the next episode at the finale, if Tony and Sarah turn on each other, who goes home? If one of the two of them winds up?
If I had my druthers, it would be Tony.
Yeah.
Simply based on what we've seen this season, I 100% believe Tony wins the game. Even this episode, which gave us a lot, I feel like it didn't necessarily water down Tony's game at all. I felt like it sent, like, the subtext that I've had to pull from players like Michelle with her relationships with Jeremy and with Nick. I felt like it kind of almost gave that in the form of Tony this episode, and it let everybody else take the spotlight. But you don't set a player like Tony like that. You don't set them up like that for 7 episodes and then just whoop, like, and they're gonna get fifth. It's just hopefully, but I think if they do turn on each other, I think Sarah goes.
Same. I'm in the same boat as you. I would prefer for Sarah to stay if it ever came to that. But just based on who has the footing to keep themselves safe, if Tony and Sarah just decide, you know what, today's the day, I feel like Tony would have these social grounds to stay. And that is based on the editing of what we have seen. But yeah, I almost want it to happen just because I feel like if Ben, Sarah, and Tony go to the end, I feel like that's relatively predictable and not that exciting.
Yeah, and I mean, not to Kagayan talk too much, but I mean, Tony did take Trisha at 5th in his first season, saying he needed her on the jury to get the votes to win. And I could very much see Tony justifying, I need Sarah to be on that jury to tell them the game that I played, even though they all know the game that Tony has played. I have a very hard time believing whoever comes back from Edge will not be like, if y'all don't vote Tony out, he wins 15-0. Like, so we'll see.
Yeah.
Sarah mentions early on that she wants to target Nick, but Ben, and I think this is a really smart observation on Sarah's part. You know, throughout the season, I've thought she's always had really smart observation skills going on. She knows that if Ben never gets to drive the bus, he's gonna get off, and it's very smart. You know, we find out that Sarah, Ben, and Tony do have a confirmed final 3. They've kind of all admitted that they have it, so it's finally out in the open that it exists.
It only took us 12 and a half episodes, but we finally had confirmation.
Right. Sarah tricks Ben into wanting to vote for Nick instead of Jeremy. And this is kind of one of those moments where I literally wrote down in my notes as soon as that happens, watch Nick win immunity, because we just got this last episode with targeting a player before the challenge, and then that player wins immunity. So it seems like right now, the way that the tribe is splitting at 7 is Ben, Tony, Sarah as a final 3, Nick, Michelle, and Jeremy as a final 3, with Denise, who would seemingly be in the middle, but she has this really tight bond with Ben. So it's really more like 4 plus 2 of Nick and Michelle and possibly 1 of Jeremy. Things are not totally cut and dry, except we definitely know Nick and Michelle together, and we definitely know that Ben, Sarah, and Tony are together. So
do you really feel that Nick and Michelle were together?
I think, again, hitting on the subtext here, I think Nick, Wendell, Michelle were a close alliance. You know, they
still in the game, absolutely.
I think they may have strategically diverted at points on votes, but never against one another. And I think they realize, especially being in the positions that they are, if one of them is out of the game, the other one has no legs to stand on. Nobody's going to jump ship from their alliance in enough numbers to help them.
I agree with all that. For me, I was kind of like, I don't necessarily think that Nick was going to stick his neck out for Michelle at any real point, except for maybe like an episode or 2 after Wendell left.
That's fair, but I mean, not every player in an alliance plays the same way, right? So you have a player who's going to go all in for their people, but then you have players who are using it as a they can use people as shields, or they can use it as a convenience. So whereas Michelle will give people like Jeremy a 50-50 advantage, and Nick probably would never give it away. You know, it could be Nick might not ever stick his neck out for Michelle, but Michelle will probably die on a pike, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think maybe it's just a difference in the definition or interpretation of an alliance. To me, it's just Nick recognizing he's got a much better shot about winning the game against Michelle than he does against a Tony, a Sarah, or arguably maybe a Ben. So for me, I'm almost like, is that an alliance, or is that just I'm not voting for you because it makes no sense for me to vote for you, and you don't want to vote for me for the exact same reason, so let's go?
That's fair. I didn't think about it that way. I think of it the way that I think of it, but I think both are valid ways of interpreting it. We head to this challenge, and I actually really like this one. I'm not a slider puzzle fan, but I like things that are like multifaceted in difficulty. So we start off, and the challenge is throw a ball on a rolly thing, run through a little obstacle course, turn around, catch the ball, and then you have to do that twice. Dig a hole under that's that typical, there's an obstacle, dig a hole under it and climb under it, and then slider puzzle. And you know, we see kind of everybody moving at pretty similar paces. I think Tony is through pretty fast. Nick gets through, Sarah gets through, Ben gets through. And once it comes down to the slider puzzle, again, I'm thinking Nick's good at slider puzzles. Like we know this, and sure enough, Tony seems to be doing much better on his slider, as Jeff points out, than he has in the past, and almost seems like he's there. And then you can tell, like at the very end, his bottom right piece goes at the top right, and that's just never. I'm not good at slider puzzles, but I always get confused when I watch people do them on Survivor because there's a possibility that they're going to come up, and like even though I'm not good at slider puzzles, I would be miserable if one popped up on Survivor. I think it's pretty like common knowledge. Like the first thing you do is get like 2 rows done and then worry about everything else. And it always surprises me when like people don't do that on the show.
Yeah, no, I think for me, maybe it's just different because I've never had a slider puzzle of like a logo.
Yeah.
Like, well, I think maybe I played in some orgs where I had that, and I've never been a fast slider puzzle solver. But for me, the way that I always try and go about it is the snake method.
Okay.
So, yeah, you basically like start with, if you don't start with a piece in the top corner, basically whatever it is, if you have like 1, 2, 3, and 4 done, when you want to get 5, 6, 7, and 8 done, you kind of snake it, and then you kind of bring 5 up, and then 5, 6, 7, and 8 all kind of land there. So,
right.
so yeah, so that's, puzzles are one of those things. I know that they would be my undoing in Survivor. There aren't too many challenges I watch on Survivor and go, I'd be amazing in that. Because there's way too many puzzles, and there's way too much swimming, and there's way too much hold your balance. And I'm none of those 3 people. That being said, I liked the challenge. I kind of was watching it going, Denise is like 5 foot nothing. And it seems like, I don't know. I don't want to like cry unfairness or anything like that, but I'm almost just like, Homegirl struggled with that, and I'm sure some people would be like, oh, well, Denise is struggling with this. And I'd be like, if you're a solid foot shorter than Ben, if not more than a foot shorter than Ben, I don't necessarily think that it's unheard of or, not believable that you would struggle doing the exact same physical challenge as Ben. So I found that to be very interesting.
Yeah, I agree. It was kind of weird that the fastest man and the fastest woman didn't win immunity.
Well, you want to know what I found funny is there's an episode where Tony's in danger and suddenly 1 man and 1 woman will win immunity. Then in the episode where Tony does not seem to be in any danger, oh, there's 1 immunity necklace amongst all of you. And I'm like, I'm not saying anything. I'm just making observations.
I'm not saying it's rigged, but Tony ain't going home. So, poor Michelle just has the struggle of the century on this challenge. And
as someone who's not, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, as someone who is not pulling for Michelle, I definitely respect that she is putting her all into staying as long as she possibly can. And I think that's fantastic. That being said, my heart went out to her in this challenge, but part of me was also like, girl. But I also realized I've never starved on an island for weeks at a time and then tried to do what she was trying to do. So I have 0 smack to talk about Michelle. That being said, when she started getting really frustrated, I was like, I feel you.
It's fair. I mean, you look at it at home and you're like, I mean, not even 1 ball. But like at the same time, I mean, there are CrossFit workouts I do where after 3 minutes I'm like about to pass out. So who knows in the heat? Who knows how it goes? But she, Nick wins immunity. Shocker, the foreshadowing of let's target Nick, pays off here. So Nick ends up winning immunity, and Michelle just, huh?
I was so devastated because I'm like, we haven't had a Nick is at risk episode in like 5.
Right.
I don't think Tyson went the second time, or maybe Wendell went. Have we had anyone even bring up his name?
The only thing that's good about this for me, is people may not be perceiving Michelle as a huge threat at this point. And if Tony really wants to keep around Jeremy as a number, now Tony might start itching to say, maybe this is the time to make a move with Nick being immune. Maybe this is the time to flush Ben's idol. Maybe this is the time to take out Denise as a middle person. Maybe this is the time to take out Sarah as a threat to me to win. Who knows? So, Michelle does kind of have this really big emotional breakdown after the challenge. I think it's an interesting moment for her. Not much to say on it, but it happened. So we get back to camp, and we sort of see names mentioned at first being people like Denise and Michelle. And then Ben is sort of stirring the pot here And he tells Jeremy to ask Michelle for the 50-50 back so that they can get Michelle out of the game and she doesn't have a chance to save herself. And then Ben tells Michelle that Jeremy is probably going to ask her for the 50-50 because he's a sneaky sneak. And then they compare notes because Ben has somewhat terrible social perceptions and does not realize that Michelle was literally just willing to give Jeremy an idol and ruin her own game by keeping him in the game by using an idol if the votes didn't go his way.
Yeah, Ben and his infinite wisdom did not consider they were going to come together and be like, what did he tell you?
And we've talked about this before. We talked about this last episode with Ben, with the idol, with Tony. He does not think about what other people in the game are thinking, is my perception. He doesn't, he thinks that information is a one-way street almost in Survivor. And I think information is the biggest web that you can create in Survivor. It's always traveling in a different direction and it goes through many different layers. So this is like a surprising amateur level move to, especially to do with allies. I mean, if you looked at Denise and you were like, yeah, Jeremy is probably going to ask you for this thing, and you know that Denise has voted against Jeremy 3 times, you're probably fine. But like those two people, it's very set up. So
one of those ones where it's like, hey, I literally handed a quasi 50 chance unity idol to Jeremy. That's not necessarily the person you should go to try and throw both of them under the bus to each other.
You would think.
Throw them under the bus to every other player in the game. But that was one of those things where I'm like, maybe Ben was trying to build his resume, or maybe he just wanted to have like his Boston Rob, Sandra, Tony level of manipulation and get away with it. But it was really one of those ones where I was like, if he gets away with this, I'll be impressed. And then it was almost just like 2-1. Michelle, did you tell him this thing? And Jeremy's like, no, he absolutely told me I need to ask you this. And I was just like, I wonder what the time frame was, because it could have been like an hour. There could have been some time where Michelle and Jeremy were kind of wary of each other, and maybe we just didn't see that. I'm willing to bet cash it was probably like 7 minutes tops.
I was gonna say 5 minutes or less would be my
it was probably literally like, if it lasted 7 minutes, it's because they spent 6.5 minutes trying to find each other.
I have to say, it's been really fun the last 2 episodes to actually watch Jeremy strategize by standing up and walking around, because for so long he would just sit on that bench and not move and everybody would go up to him.
I gotta be honest. The Doctor is in approach to strategizing before tribal council. I'm here for it.
It's like the Sandra sit-out bench, but it's like the Jeremy strategizing bench.
Because I'm that person. I'm like, I am tired. I am dehydrated. I am malnourished. I am barely sleeping. I'm not about to do this whole let me walk around the island while everyone tells me everything they think about the game. I don't have time. I don't have the energy. You want to plop down right next to me and talk? I am happy to listen because, well, I'm not happy to listen because I'm sure after 4 days of that, I'd be like, could you wrap this up? That's great for me. And I'm like the king on Thursday's queen of the gift of gab. But Jeremy just kind of sitting down and actually walking around. I noticed that too, where I was like, look at Jeremy getting some cardio exercise. I was like,
trying to warm up for those final immunity challenges. So Jeremy wants Tony to vote for Ben. He wants Nick, Michelle, Jeremy, Ben, or Jeremy, Tony voting for Ben so that Ben would leave in a 4-3 vote. Tony's not cool with losing Ben yet, which I get, but I don't get. Again, you know, the fewer idols that you have going towards the end, the better. Because yeah, you might trust this person, but if they have an idol in their pocket and they're desperate to get a big move on their resume, you could be the big move. You know, so I feel like the best thing in the game is to take the unknown out of the equation. And that's why I'm more and more shocked that these players who know not only about each other's idols, but who know the past that the reputations that these players have of being deceitful, especially when they have power in their hands. It's very surprising to me that they don't want to flush idols at this point.
I wholeheartedly. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was done. Sorry.
Okay. No, I'm sorry. I was like, I'm trying not to jump over you. I think for me, I wholeheartedly agree with you. The one thing, and it's not even a disagreement, it's more of a, it seems to be, I mean, we have to watch the finale to know for sure. It seems to be the dominant trio right now wants the finals to be Tony, Sarah, and Ben. I have to be honest. If it's Tony, Sarah, and Ben in the end, to me, that's going to be a more satisfying final three than if any combination of any players, let's say, like, worst case scenario, Nick or Adam come back into the game, and Michelle is spot number 2, and then it's Sarah or Tony in the final. It's like, okay, we kind of know that it's going to be a landslide. So if it has to be any combination of players, I would not be mad to see like Tony and Sarah, and obviously I'm biased for Denise to go to the end. Like, I'm hoping at least 2 of them get into the end. It's really going to depend upon who wins the battle back competition. Because for me, I still kind of stand by, even if it was like Kim or Sophie or Natalie, whom I love. Like, if Natalie gets back into the game, as much as it'd be amazing to watch her win it, as the true Survivor fan of me is like, no. So I agree with you in the sense that there's this mindset that these players and all the idols and everyone knowing about the idols, it's like, what are you guys doing? Because the things that you know about that you're not doing anything to resolve, even if Tony or Ben just said player idol, and then it turned out they wasted it, you can still hide behind the facade of it was a vibe, or I kept hearing people bringing up your name. I've had 3, or when people start doing that whispering thing, I'm like, I had 3 separate people say they were voting for you. Anything.
Right.
So it's interesting to me. I agree with you that people aren't doing that. That being said, I'm not upset they're not doing it just because, if somehow magically it'd be like Tony, Sarah, and Denise at the end, I wouldn't be upset. I know that's not going to happen. I also know Denise can't win based on the edit they've given her. So I'm just kind of like, whatever.
Right. Tony finds this plan out and decides that he's going to split the votes, 3 for Jeremy, 2 for Michelle, and then Michelle and Jeremy will vote whoever they vote for, probably Ben, because they've already approached him for that.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm pretty convinced Nick is going to flip away from this, because why would he go with Tony over Michelle and Jeremy? And it also would be pretty obvious, and we didn't see it happen, but I'm fairly confident that Nick ratted Tony's plan out to Jeremy and Michelle, because why wouldn't you? And as the second episode happened, now I kind of think it didn't happen, but at the moment when I was watching it, I'm like, it only makes sense if Nick went to Michelle and Jeremy and was like, hey, Tony totally wants me to vote split with them, so I'm probably just going to go with you guys, and then we win 3-2 or whatever, 3-2 because they want me to vote for Jeremy.
Help me memory-wise. Jeremy and Michelle in that vote voted for, was it Ben?
Ben.
They voted for Ben. Yeah. I think Nick probably would have put himself in a better position had he joined them and just voted for Ben. I feel.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean,
it would have definitely been Michelle and Jeremy on one side. Thankful to him. Sarah and Tony would have been pissed at him, but it also would have been like, you're the 2 biggest threats in the game. What do you want me to tell you other than I'll vote with you this round because that benefits my game. So the fact that he allowed Jeremy to go, I was like, but that's one of several strings. Like when Nick voted to get rid of Kim and Sophie, I was like, how does this benefit you in the long run?
Well, yeah, let's definitely talk about. So I mean, tribal council plays out. It's sort of generic. Ben
didn't have all the whispering in forever, and I got to be honest, I don't mind the whispering, but I wasn't upset it didn't show up.
Yeah. I mean, we end up seeing Michelle play the 50-50 on herself, and we get a cute little victory dance when it plays out. But she only had 2 votes against her, so it ended up not really playing into anything. But the vote ends up being 3 Jeremy, 2 Michelle, which is voided out, and 2 Ben. So Jeremy does go home. Nick votes against Jeremy instead of voting with Michelle and Jeremy for Ben. Even though they've all been kind of saying they need Ben to go. So yes, let's get to the strategy from Nick's level, because I don't really understand the decision. The ironic thing is using the logic that Jeremy has to go because they can't beat Jeremy, and then right after that, Nick going, well, the next most obvious person for me to go after is Ben, because Ben has to go because Ben doesn't want to work with me. So if Jeremy has to go, and Jeremy's been public enemy #1 for the last 3 votes, you vote for Jeremy to put yourself in a position where you'll never have the numbers. And we get to this point post tribal where Michelle is not necessarily going off on Nick, but she's calling him out, asking him valid questions. And it's sad to say that like things putting feathers in Michelle's hat are like speaking logically to players who are not playing logically, but like that is proving to me that at least she's a step ahead of players who are playing like Nick and Ben to some degree. Sure. Because she's asking the questions, you just took out our way to the end, so yeah, you can't beat Jeremy, but how do you get to the end without using Jeremy for one more vote? Because now we're at 6 and it's 4-2 and we're never going to make a crack in that ever.
Yeah, so that to me, I agree with that. My question is that because Michelle strategically is just so sound and so well-rounded, or is that purely because Michelle has realized time and time again that she's not in the inner sanctum of the alliance that's running the game?
I
personally think it's the latter.
I think it can be both, and I think it is both, because you can obviously be. It's one of those things when you see games play out. It frustrates me when an underdog, like Nick has said earlier in the season, is no one's here to play, no one's here to play. Just because people aren't playing the game you want them to play doesn't mean they're not playing. And that bugs me when people look at someone in the majority and they're like, you're not even playing the game. No, they're playing the game. They're just not helping you to play the game.
Well, no, that's just when I'd be like, please remind me of all of the like strategic, and again, it possibly happened, we just never saw it. I would just be that person to be like, Nick, please remind me of all these strategic mastermind moves that you've made from day one. I've got time. No, go ahead. I'm like, oh wait, no, you let Parvati go because you wanted to let Parvati go, and then you let Yul go because you wanted to let Yul go. Was that something that wasn't going to happen, and you infiltrated everyone's thought processes, and then got everyone to switch up what they were doing? Oh, you didn't do that? Then I'm really confused at what you're talking about, because when it comes to people saying this person's not playing the game, this person's not doing anything, this person doesn't do anything at camp, I can only have one person that's been said about multiple times in multiple episodes, and that's Nick. So anytime he's got to get on his high horse about people not playing the game, I'm sitting here like, you're cute. I can hear you. Keep going.
So I think, Michelle makes the point that they don't have a path to the end because Jeremy was taken out. So, for as much as you want to say, well, it's just, it could be because Michelle's sort of just on the outside looking in, I don't think that's necessarily fair. Michelle knows, obviously, how to get to the end and I don't want to say how to get to the end and win. She knows how to get to the end even if the numbers are against her. And at some point you have to be able to find the crack. And she can see that this group of 3 is, with Denise added on to the outside, is fairly impenetrable. And, I think that's fair. If they had somebody like Jeremy to pull in as a 3, they take out Ben, they can convince Denise, hey, if you vote with us, we can take Jeremy out after the next vote, and the 3 of us, Denise, Michelle, Nick, can all make the final 3, which I think Michelle, and I feel like we kind of get an allusion to it, Michelle, I think, realizes is her shot at winning the game. And for a player like Nick, it would make more sense for him to realize that's also my shot at winning the game. But instead, we see Nick make the decision to take out Jeremy, and then his logical choice is, well, Ben needs to go next. And that's, when you have the votes to make the move that puts you in the better position, you have to take it. And taking out a player that everybody wants out of the game is not always this puts me in a better position. For somebody like Ben, Sarah, Tony, absolutely taking Jeremy out of the game is the best decision. And I think, the second episode, we definitely see Nick get his comeuppance of making bad strategic decisions.
I think we see not only that, because I don't necessarily know if there's anything else we need to talk about part 1 of the episode.
Sorry?
I don't know if there's anything else we need to talk about part 1 of the episode before we start diving into part 2.
No, I mean, I think we got through part 1 pretty much. I didn't notice much of anything else that we didn't talk about.
Okay, cool. I only asked because I didn't want to start jumping into part 2 if we weren't done with part 1.
Oh yeah. No, I think we're there.
I think we're there too. Yeah, I feel as though a player like Nick, to his credit, he's really good at noticing where the middle is and trying to put himself there. And that's my very nice way of saying I don't necessarily know that Nick does enough for anyone to be like, yeah, I'm going to sit next to him and lose. Not going to happen.
Right. You're in a cast of people who know how to play like that. Michelle knows how to play like that. Denise knows how to play like that. Nick knows how to play like that.
You're talking about a lot of players who aren't necessarily high profile in that they make a lot of bold moves or they keep themselves in the spotlight, a la Tony or a la Rob or Boston Rob or things like that. You have players that are like, I'm going to go ahead and sit back, let the bigger egos have the bigger egos, and then when I need to, I'm going to slit some throats. And that makes all the sense in the world to me. It's not necessarily the most exciting way to play the game. That being said, there's a way of doing it and still winning. And obviously Nick has done that, but it just seemed like as little as he's done that seems to have drastically impacted the game. Like you said before, getting rid of the player in the game that everyone seems to have their focus on, unless you're worried that one player is going to mount the charge against you, does not make a tremendous amount of sense for you to go after them. And again, we say that because we're not out there and we've also never played the game. But it was interesting to see Nick vote against Jeremy for that exact reason.
Right.
So, and you know, I think that also speaks to the level of gameplay that's happening this season because everyone has to keep reassuring everyone. Everyone has to keep being like, no, you're good. We're going to the final 3 or final 4. We're doing this. We're doing this. And even though I think everybody's probably got their hands in at least 90% of the other players' pots. In the final, what was after Jeremy goes? It's what, final 6?
Yeah.
I'd be stunned if there was any one player of the 6 remaining. I'd be stunned if there wasn't at least, or I'd be stunned if there was a one player that didn't have at least 4 other people convinced. Oh no, I got your back. I got your back. I got your back.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I could maybe see it. You know, as we see the second episode play out, maybe that's the case with players like Nick or Michelle, but who knows? So speaking of reassuring other players, Michelle realizes that Nick has kind of just put her in a hole, and she tells Nick, I'm number 1 and you're number 2 now, and we don't have the numbers to do what you want to do, so congratulations. So Michelle realizes she needs to throw a Hail Mary because the only thing that she can do, and she thinks that her best bet is to plant seeds with Sarah, which as a viewer at this point I would agree very strongly. Yes, I would agree very strongly that turning Sarah would be her best shot. You know, Sarah is a player who has played a respectable game. But there's always an issue, and, you know, not to get on my soapbox right now, but there is always an issue, and we've seen it throughout almost every season of Survivor. When players play a similar game and get to the end, typically one player gets almost all of the credit. Now, it doesn't always happen, but it happens pretty frequently. And when it's a male and female partnership, almost always it's the male that gets all of the credit. So if Sarah knows her Survivor history, this could be a moment where she's very concerned about going to the end with someone who played as her partner the whole way. Sarah doesn't take the bait at all. She immediately kind of shuts Michelle down, goes right to Tony. So that was a thing. How did you feel about that?
Again, I don't want to beat a dead horse, especially since I know I talk a bunch. It was interesting watching that just because I think Sarah's a smart person, and this is a game for $2 million. She would not be doing this unless she felt in her heart of hearts she could take Tony to the end. Maybe she has plans to slit his throat at 4 or 5, and they're just not necessarily showing us that. Who knows? But I definitely feel like Sarah must believe that if she did go to the end with Ben and Tony, as that seems to be the plan, that she can win. That definitely seems to be. I don't think she'd do it if she didn't think she had a chance. And she talked, in the second part of the episode, we do kind of talk about it. We started to talk about that. She's like, I want to go to the Super Bowl. I want to go against people I know it'll be a challenge to win. And I'm like, that happened the first time Tony won. I know you watched that season because you were on it. Took Tony to the end and how well that worked out for Wu. And again, as a fan, I'd rather see 3 people that have resumes to go to the end and possibly do like a big 3-way battle to the death for the title. That being said, I'm just like as a person who would want to be a player, it's just like, girl, I get that you want to put on a show, and I'm down for that. That is a $2 million show. You might be losing if you don't get that together. That's it.
I think Sarah has clout and the ability to argue that she should win if she goes with Tony. I completely agree with that mentality. However, I don't necessarily think that the jury is going to listen to her and go, yeah, you're right. I think they're going to go, well, congratulations, you believe in yourself, but we think Tony did more. And that's the fear is, yeah, you can talk your game up fine, but are people going to buy it?
There's that. And I think with Tony and Sarah, at least in the jury's eyes, Sarah can bring up a lot of things that either the jury hasn't seen because they haven't been at camp, or that maybe we as an audience hasn't seen. That being said, Tony's actually done things at tribal council. Tony's literally told you, don't play your advantage, you're fine. And then Tony didn't do it. Tony's also going to be able to say, hey, Ben wanted to get rid of Jeremy. We got Ben to vote out Kim instead.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but was it at Jeremy's vote out tribal council where it was 3-2 and Jeremy goes, oh, who did it? And Tony goes, it was me. Every time he's taking credit in front of the jury, every time, the last 3 votes.
And that if anything, I think is why, I mean, obviously the edit wants us to believe that Tony's going to win or that Tony should win. So that we'll be less angry if it does happen. Whereas, and that's something that Sarah can't be held accountable for because she doesn't know what the edit's going to deem as important enough to show the audience and what isn't. So I don't fault Sarah for that. Literally, and again, this could just be that we don't see everything that happens at tribal council. We obviously don't. And maybe Sarah does make points for herself or does moves or says things in front of the jury as well. Mm-hmm. But also, it's just kind of like, that I sincerely hope is the case. Because otherwise, it's like, if she's not doing these things and Tony is, and she's still committed to taking Tony to the end, I'm like, girl, I got nothing for you.
The only way that she could win, if that's the case, is if she has a plan to get to the final tribal and be like, I was the reason why Tony survived because he was a total nutcase and I helped him all the way and I did all these things for him that you guys didn't see. And that's such a long shot, if that's...
Long shot. To me, minus the crying, I feel like that's what happened with Dawn and Cochran, and they gave Cochran...
Oh, yeah. 1,000,000%.
Because to me, I'm like, Dawn could have made it to the end regardless of who she chose to go with. Cochran was only going to the end with Dawn. And people
right.
Like, that he figured it out and he manipulated her. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. Dawn was just a sucker for loyalty. And that's not something that's not a trait that Cochran was able to instill in her in 39 days. Hallelujah.
I completely agree. But the Dawn and Cochran argument is for another time because I could rant for hours about how Dawn deserved to win.
But yeah, I think that seems to be the setup that we're getting if Sarah and we both go to the final 3.
I see it for sure. So we kind of take a break after this talk with Sarah, Michelle, and then Sarah going to Tony, and we hop over on to Edge of Extinction. Yeah. We see we get this clue, and everyone kind of takes off running. Queen Natalie. She knows this island. She was born on this island. She has risen from the island. So
Queen of the island.
She sits on her throne and finds the advantage, and I guess rather in the form of a disadvantage. So, she kind of
extinction.
She enlists the help of everybody to figure out who they should give it to, which I think is kind of interesting. Like she's, obviously the people on Edge of Extinction are now comparing notes about gameplay. There's a big part of, yeah, they want to get the fire tokens, but they also want to make an impact in the game. So were you surprised to see that she picked Nick to give the advantage of giving a challenge disadvantage?
I was surprised, but I think as many as she wanted to get, this is just how I'm like, I definitely feel like if I ever go on Survivor, I got to figure out who the smartest person is and try my damnedest to get them out. Never, both of the extortion advantage and the challenge disadvantage, it never would have dawned on me to ask someone for more coins than they had.
Yeah.
Never would it even dawn on me to think, because I'm the person who'd be like, what if we know that person has 4, why would we ask for 6? It's like, then that person's going to be like, well, then I have to expose how many tokens I have, and that's potentially going to work against me. And we saw with Tony, and then we obviously saw with Nick, that they were both willing to do that. So clearly there are aspects of the game that my brain just can't wrap itself around. I felt like it was either going to be Nick or Denise. And I don't know if they wanted to help Nick potentially win immunity a second time, or if they just didn't want to deplete Denise of all of her fire tokens. I don't know if it was like let's simultaneously take a dig at Nick as, you know, who he might target, or if it was we just want to help other players preserve the tokens they have. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm not really sure either. And I didn't really think too much about the strategy of it, because ultimately I just kind of figured, they were probably just trying to get a lot of tokens, and they figured Michelle will probably throw in with Nick because they know that they've been working together. I'm sure Wendell has been saying, yes, Nick and Michelle are working together. You know, I'm sure the people on Edge are comparing notes. So 8 tokens to give someone a disadvantage in a challenge at the final 6. Personally, I think this is the worst thing that Edge has offered. I wouldn't bother spending 8 tokens. Now, I will preface this with the fact that, and I've said it before, and there are people that keep telling me, well, they showed the list in the first episode. BS. Fire tokens are supposed to mean something in the game for the contestants that are staying in the game. We as fans and viewers should be shown what the potential is for people buying advantages in the game or buying things in the game. And we literally were shown, I guess, in episode 1, what the things that people could buy. We've never seen it since. So this whole time people are accumulating all these fire tokens. Oh my God. And I get it. You can buy advantages from people on Edge of Extinction, but there were things that they could have bought throughout the season, and we never got to see anything about it. You know, fire tokens are actually an interesting induction into the game. And it's a bummer that I'm not blaming it on any one party, right? It's just a bummer that we don't get to find out anything else about them, about what people in the game could be obtaining. Whether it shows the list, like every time there's a challenge and they're like, you get 2 fire tokens, and it flashes the list for 5 seconds, like, and here's the stuff that you could earn with fire tokens. Like, I should know in episode 13, if someone has 8 fire tokens, are they going to be able to buy an idol? I don't know that. And like that frustrates me. So I needed to rant about that for a second, because I just think it's silly.
I think it's perfectly acceptable that you rant about that, because you're 120% correct.
Yeah. And then so someone like Nick, who has to raise 8 tokens to give someone a disadvantage in a challenge, like if it's 10 tokens to get an idol, I would sooner be like, Michelle, let's pool our tokens together, and maybe one of us can win the challenge. And then if we do, then we have 11 fire tokens. I can buy a hidden immunity idol, and we're both surviving, and we're taking out a threat. But we don't know if any of that is even possible of happening. And clearly the talks are happening. Clearly people are thinking about purchasing things, but we're not seeing any in the edit. And we're kind of being spoon-fed to think, oh, well, fire tokens, if you're in the game, are actually kind of meaningless unless you want to buy a bag of rice. So that's a bummer.
Yeah, no, the fact that I think, as far as players in game not spending their tokens on things being offered from Edge of Extinction, have we seen anything purchased other than the bag of rice at the end of this episode?
That's the only thing anybody in game has gotten at all.
Because I thought maybe something happened in like the first 4 or 5 episodes I forgot about, just because of how long it's been. Isolation is fun. But I'm sitting here just going, the fact that they keep talking about fire tokens, and thankfully, I think to the show's credit, the one thing they haven't done, I'm grateful, is they haven't had like a solid 3 questions surrounding fire tokens at Tribal Council every week.
Right.
They were asked, just like they always do, like any talk about hidden immunity idols, even when there's no idol that gets played. The fact that I'm sure the questions were asked to the players, like, what do you think of fire tokens? Who has the most? You guys talk about these things? The fact that they haven't showed it to us, I'm like, well, thank Christ, because I don't have the time or the patience, because it doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah, it really, I guess the frustrating thing for me is it's basically the equivalent of Island of the Idols, but the players offering the things are on Edge of Extinction, because it was like, instead of sacrificing your vote if you lose or if you're wrong, now you're just giving away fire tokens that you were given by players that are on the Edge of Extinction. It's like so similar that it bugs me, because I just feel like it could have had more of an impact in the game, and it didn't get there. And again, I'm not blaming any one party for it. I just feel like, as a viewer, I should be more informed about this currency that, sometimes comes up in Tribal Council too, but ultimately doesn't mean anything. So anyway, Nick raises 8 tokens. I wouldn't bother for a disadvantage in a challenge, especially being in the position that Nick and Michelle are in, because if Michelle is public enemy number 1 and she ends up winning immunity, I'm toast. So I don't want to give anybody a disadvantage in a challenge except Michelle, so that I survive another vote.
Yeah. I found it fascinating that the advantage was given to Ben, because how many individual immunity challenges has Ben won this game?
0. This was his first one.
That's why I'm like, well, no, he didn't win immunity this episode.
Oh, no, you're right. I'm sorry. Yeah, he didn't win immunity.
Yeah, that's why I was like, to me, it would make sense to give the disadvantage to Tony, who won 3 individual challenges, to give it to Denise, who's won 2 individual challenges. The fact that he played it on Ben, I was like, unless, and maybe the strategy was, let's play it on Ben and then start planting the seeds that it's someone that he's working with. Because Ben, we haven't seen much of it, in my opinion, but Ben keeps getting touted as being this overly paranoid, hypersensitive player. And I think now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm like, I believe there might have been a mention to that in the episode.
So
what the plan was, but I agree with you. I'm like, 8 tokens just to tell one person the challenge is going to be harder for them. Girl, bye.
but once Nick and Michelle started talking about this, it sort of started to make more sense in confessionals. They were like, we can use this disadvantage to make cracks in that alliance and cause distrust, and that would work really well for us.
I mean,
and that's our chance to make Ben finally have a big enough meltdown to go home. But the problem is that they picked Ben to give the disadvantage to. And I feel like if they had picked a different player, it would have had a better payoff, because Michelle has voted against Ben already. Nick wants to target Ben. So if you want Ben to become paranoid, but you're also wanting to vote Ben out of the game, Ben's not going to think that Ben disadvantaged himself. Ben's probably going to think, well, everybody here voted in my favor last round except for Michelle, so Michelle probably gave me the disadvantage. And that's why I was confused. Like, you could have gone a step further and thought better about it. I think ultimately it was weighing on them. They were like, well, we want to take Ben out, so let's give Ben the disadvantage, but also maybe he'll become paranoid. And it was more so, let's make sure he doesn't win immunity, than it was, let's get him out by making his allies think he did it, you know?
Could be. What did you think of the challenge?
I think this challenge is pretty overdone. I'm sort of sick of seeing it, because it also comes up a lot in Australian Survivor, which I always talk about, I love so much. But it just comes up a lot. And it was interesting. I actually was really impressed by Ben with a disadvantage coming back as strong as he did. He almost won.
Yeah.
But I was very happy to see Michelle win.
Are you?
I was actually super excited. My stock in Michelle went a lot higher this episode, for many reasons. So
Okay. Tell me why. I'm curious.
okay, so first off, I think the play that Michelle made to go to Sarah and talk about why she really can't beat Tony in the end, I think is smart. I think Michelle, more than anything, has shown throughout her 2 seasons on Survivor, her social perceptions are actually super strong. She may not have strong strategic perceptions, but she can recognize where she stands in the game. And I think, to her credit, I'm going to say the word plucky again. You know, when we see her back is against the wall is when she puts on her best work. And she even recognizes that in herself. As a player, when the chips are down, that's when she can rise. And, you know, if someone like that were to say that line and not make anything of it, I would be like, pfft. But Michelle has not only won the game by doing that before, she's also advanced herself a couple rounds past where she probably would have been, by doing something to that caliber. So I actually put a lot of stock in Michelle for saying those things. She has so many friends on the jury. And the beauty of that is, by being on the wrong side of the vote so many times, yes, it's a disadvantage because you can't say strategically I had control of the game. But you can also say, my social bonds with all of you guys put me in a position where I had so many fire tokens that I was able to get advantages in the game. And I was in a position where maybe strategy wasn't a strong suit of mine because I never had the numbers to do what I wanted to do, but that didn't hold me back from playing a stronger physical game or a stronger social game, or recognizing that I needed fire tokens. So I allowed myself to be in a spot where I was like, okay with not being in the driver's seat, because that would end up giving me favor with the jury and the fire tokens from you. So, you know, a lot of it is you have to make the argument for the player, and if they don't make the final 3, you don't know if they're ever going to be able to make it for themselves. Right. But I'm not going to say Michelle has impressed me this season. I think that would be a bit of a stretch for me. But if I were to rank, and I might at the end of the episode, at the end of this, if I were to rank where Michelle fits on my personal who has impressed me in the final five, gameplay wise, she would probably be in my top three of this final five.
In your top three.
Yeah. And
See,
that's
I have to really think about it. Sorry, go ahead.
it's mostly because I think that recency matters a lot in the eyes of the jury as well. And I think the more that you can um, the more that you can pull off towards the end of the game, and especially if you have that underdog story going for yourself, the more of a chance you have at winning that prize at the end of the game.
Yeah.
And she has more steam right now, I think, in her engine than players who have had previously impressive moves, such as Denise, maybe even a Sarah or a Ben, who haven't had moves in front of the jury like Tony has had moves in front of the jury. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Part of I agree with what you're saying. And I think if Michelle goes to the end, there's a chance that she might get votes. I think what makes me disagree with that are the players who if I were Sophie or if I were Kim, and again, I'm basing this purely off of what I'm seeing on the show. And I know that's the tip of the ice, the flag on the tip of the iceberg as far as everything that happens. I almost feel like Sophie was sacrificed because Michelle was never going to be as big of a threat as Sophie.
Mm-hmm.
Kim was sacrificed because Michelle was never going to be as big of a threat as Kim. I'm sorry, Michelle was never going to be as big of a threat as Kim. That being said, I can appreciate Mel's, or I almost called her Mel, Michelle's luckiness. I can love the fact that she never gave up. I can appreciate the fact that she stuck in much longer than I would have guessed that she would have. I mean, I figured she was going to go as far as she has. I've been saying that pretty much since the beginning. Because of that fact, people are going to get rid of Sophie and Yul and Parvati and all of them before they're ever going to get rid of Michelle. So her involvement in the final five surprises me not. That being said, I feel like if it were a similar situation of heroes versus villains, where Sandra's like, heroes, take out Russell. Let me help you take out Russell. Y'all will not let me do this. And it's not like Michelle's like trying to put these plans together and then getting caught and then still not being voted out, a la Sandra. So that's why I'm like, I get it. I almost feel like if Michelle were to win, I would be surprised even still, just because I think there are going to be that players that say, Michelle hung in there, Michelle got things done, she lasted, but I don't see how her gameplay rivals or even is better than anybody else in there. I think Michelle could probably go against Denise and have a decent shot at winning. I think and I'm only saying that from the edit.
Yeah.
Denise has played a low-key game, and I'm not going to fault her for that. And people could argue Michelle's played a low-key game as well. I just think there's a difference between being in the wrong side of the vote as many times as Michelle has versus Denise. But Denise has been on the wrong side of the vote several times with Michelle. So.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to that point, I would say two things. And first, I think, as much as it could be a credit to people's games, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? Tony, Sarah, Ben, it's not broke. Denise, it's not broke. They're going to Final Four. Don't fix it. It's fine. It's been going that way. But if it is broke for Michelle and she manages to fix it, or if it is fixed, break it, if she can do that, and we still have 3 votes to go through, well, not really 3 votes, but, a fire-making challenge, which is still cool.
Fire-making challenge.
But, if she does manage to break it, is that impressive enough in the eyes of a jury? Like, yeah, at Final 6, you still didn't have any huge moves to your credit. You played a good game from the bottom, but then you did end up taking out Tony, and you ended up working with whoever returned from Edge to make this move. Who knows? So, and I don't want to hypothesize about, oh my God, they're going to be able to do it or they're not, but the potential is there, I think, to have a stronger argument. It's a stronger argument to be in the underdog position and rise up than it is to be coasting throughout.
Right. And I think like if it turned out to magically be, let's say Nick gets back in the game and somehow magically it's Nick, Michelle, and Denise, Michelle, I think, would have a pretty decent argument as to why she would win. I still wouldn't agree with that, but I think she has a good stance to at least attack trying to win the game. I don't think that's what's going to happen. That being said, I was going to make another point about Michelle that coincided with what you just said. I just forgot what it was. So.
Well, my other thought was also, if Michelle is attempting to make moves or attempting to work with certain people and is being locked out of certain alliances or, constantly being left out of certain things, to some extent, I'm not a person who necessarily thinks that dominance is an important trait in a Survivor winner. I know there are some people that really think that's all that matters, but I don't necessarily think that. If she's trying constantly and the people that she's working with are disappointing her by making bad decisions, a la Nick, a la, Wendell, just multiple people, is that really something that's her fault? Maybe she should have found better people to work with, but maybe she was also kind of pigeonholed into that position by these people who had plans to work that way the whole time. Who knows?
And you actually helped remind me what it was that I was going to say about Michelle before. I get, and I know, excuse me, I know that fans of Survivor are definitely, they love a good underdog story. They love to see people come from a low position and then build themselves up. And I think you and I are both amongst the fans where it's like, well, no, if you win 5 immunities in a row, to me, that doesn't mean you played a great game. That just means you won a bunch of immunities. And in that similar vein, it's like, yeah, she had to claw herself up from the bottom. But I'm always that person to go, who put her in the bottom?
Right. That's fair.
I'm like, I don't think you get put in the bottom if you have a superior strategic game.
Fair. Yeah. And I mean, I would definitely argue that she's lacking.
Socially, it's because you did something wrong.
Yeah. I would definitely argue that she's lacking strategically. I think for sure. But I also think
because a lot of times you can get brought along as like a GOAT or even like a third or a fourth. And some people say, oh, that was my superior strategic game. And maybe, but I'm also just like, I think socially, Michelle's consistently left out of the vote because socially, she's doing something wrong. And strategically, she's doing something wrong. So that would be my argument to her. I'm definitely more impressed with her than I've ever been between the 2 seasons that she's playing. But again, I'm impressed with her because she's fighting, but she's having to fight because she put herself in that position.
Right. That's fair. All right. We should probably move on because we spent a lot of time on Michelle and we still have half the episode to go through, but we're going to zoom through this because you and I are probably going to have a big argument when it comes to the end of this, and I am ready for it. Because I heard you say something earlier and I let it go, but I have a passionate argument to make at the end of this about who I want to win the game.
Okay.
So,
what was it said? Let's just cut to it because I don't really care about all the pre-tribal stuff.
Well, let's go through it because our Queen Denise does have a couple of moments that are very like head scratchy, confusing, kind of makes sense, but also what are you doing? Denise offers to use her fire tokens to buy rice because apparently fire tokens are just like whose line it is, and anyway, the points don't matter. So she wants to buy rice to go home with a belly full of food. Kind of alluding to the fact that, oh my God, I'm the target. I'm going to go home. It's fine. How do you feel about this move, knowing that she is trying to set up Nick and Michelle to not fight? Obviously, Michelle has immunity.
And I say this, 1, as a big Denise fan, and 2, as a person that acknowledges we don't see everything, we don't know everything. It almost felt unnecessary.
Yeah.
It almost just felt like at my most, if I were going to make a move like that, at my most strategic, I'd just be like, well, maybe I wouldn't. I was about to say, maybe I just say, hey guys, I'm just going to buy the bag of rice because I don't have enough to buy an immunity idol, assuming she could have bought an immunity idol. I don't have enough. I'm cool with buying rice. But at the same time, if you buy rice for the tribe, just like with Brenda in Caramoan, I think that was her season, she picks people to go on the reward and then she gets voted out. So maybe without them telling us, that was her way of just kind of being like, it could be me. I'm not doing this, blah, 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 blah. And she didn't want it to be viewed a la Sarah, like I'm going to let Nick take my Chinese food reward so that she wouldn't be targeted. It felt kind of unnecessary, potentially unneeded. And for like the first time I think I've ever really seen Denise, it almost seemed like mean-spirited, a little bit.
I have a theory, an unsupported theory, but I have a theory. So we know that this Final 3 alliance has 2 hidden immunity idols within it, and they're dragging Denise along as a 4th, or at least that's how Tony and Sarah feel about it. So I think Denise doesn't know about where the idols are in play. And if she suspects that Nick has an idol, which to be fair, that Final 3 has probably planted in her head, Nick might have an idol, then it absolutely makes sense for Denise to go, you know what? It could be me. If it is me, it's fine. I'm at peace with it. I just want food. So that Nick doesn't think, oh, I've got to play my idol, which we know at home he doesn't have. But if Denise is in this spot of you're losing at the 4th place fire making challenge and doesn't know where the idols are, then I kind of get it a little bit more. I also think that Denise playing possum could be, because I feel like she's such a smart player and such a good social player. I think this is her way of trying to convince people that she's the GOAT to take to the final 3. Because if she gets to the final 3, I don't see her going, yeah, I kind of gave up. I think she's going to go, you saw me laying on the side of the road and I gotcha. Like, you put me in your car and I was alive and I gave you rabies. Like, I don't know what she's going to say, but
that may be the metaphor of the season.
There's always a really shitty metaphor, but why not one about roadkill?
Rabies. You were worried about COVID. It's all about rabies. Go ahead.
So that's my theory. If it's right, who knows? But
it's an interesting theory. It seemed like everything was going fine, and when Denise's name first got thrown out, I was just like, oh my god. And then I was like, no, I feel as though they always throw a name out, and then like they'll throw a second name out, and it'll move to that, and sometimes it'll move to a third name. So the fact that Denise's name got brought up first, I was like, nobody move.
Yeah, I was not thrilled.
I was like, I am not here for Denise getting voted out. And then it moved, and then I think it moved the second time. And then with Tony and the Spy Nest, which I want to hate that, but I can't hate that.
No, I hate it. I hate it so much.
My question for you. Sarah knows that Tony was doing the whole Spy Nest situation. Do you think Sarah was aware when it was her, Ben, and Denise? Do you think she was aware that Tony was up there at the time? And if so, and if I'm jumping ahead too soon, by all means, let me know. I found it very interesting because, spoiler alert, Nick goes at the next tribal council. But this was the time where Tony is like, oh, this is what I was thinking, but I heard Denise saying she wants me to go at 4, so I need to break that up. I need to get her out, and that did not happen.
Right.
I feel like every time Tony changes someone's mind, we get a 5-minute segment to that. Tony says Denise needs to go. Denise does not go. We do not know why. Tony does not get rid of Denise. And I'm, again, that person who's like, okay, editing.
I think, here's my thought. I think Sarah absolutely knew that Tony was in the nest. I think Sarah has been bringing people to the water well to talk, knowing Tony is up there. So that's kind of their agreement to prove trust between each other, that if someone wants to have a conversation with me, I'm going to bring them here so you can listen, so that you know I'm with you and you know everything that I know. That's just what I'm expecting.
Okay, that makes more sense, because my next question to you was, I understand how that benefits Tony. I don't see how that benefits Sarah until you put it the way you just put it, where I'm just like, okay, no. Sarah's like, I don't know. As I'm saying this, I'm like, I guess that's a way that Sarah can be like, I'm not putting words in anyone's mouths. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. That being said, on the way to the water well, Sarah could just be like, I'm about to take you to the water well. Tony is in the tree. Tony's going to be listening to us. Every answer that I give you, I need you to pretend like you're voting out this person.
Yeah, I mean, she could very well do that, and it might actually happen too. We don't know.
Right. And I think the only reason it would benefit her to not do that is the way that some players this season have been playing. They will get that information and run it to everybody. And so Sarah probably knows, like, if I betray Tony in that way, they'll probably target me. And Tony is the last person to be targeting me, because last time Tony targeted me, I went home.
Right. I mean, it's a volatile game at the top 6 if you don't have the necklace on and you know that 2 people have idols. If you get caught betraying your 2 allies in any way, shape, or form, you're probably going to go home. So until Sarah has a necklace on her neck, I can understand the reluctance to make a move like that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I almost feel like it's Sarah's game. I know that based on the edit, it's Tony's game to lose. But I almost feel like Sarah has the capacity to go, I played an amazing game. I also played an amazing game while having to hold the hand of a crazy person the entire time.
Right. But at the same way that you can say, well, who put Michelle in a bad social situation? It's Michelle. Who made the decision to hold Tony's hand the whole game? Sarah.
Sarah did, I think. And I think she was willing to kind of have more flexibility with things going on until Tony took out Sophie.
Right. And, you know, it's just kind of a move that locks Tony into being such a front runner, because he really did pigeonhole Sarah into having nowhere else to turn, in her mind at least.
Yeah, I feel like for Sarah to for Sophie to go and for Sarah to just be mad about it, as she understandably was, but then to never really make a move without Tony's consent or without Tony's blessing, or to kind of like, hey, you took out Sophie when I didn't want to take out Sophie. I got to take out someone that you wanted to keep in. She doesn't do that. It's just, I think it's just going to play to the narrative that she just followed Tony.
Right, for sure.
At least jurors. I think jurors that are actually paying attention,
Yeah.
I think they'll give her more credit than that, but who knows?
Who knows? So we're about to head into trouble. Ben says he's going to hold on to his idol. Nick feels like he's in the best position he's been in all game, which is the funniest thing I've ever heard somebody say at the final 6 when out of the bottom 2, the other person wins immunity. I've never... What? So my assumption is that Nick probably said this line at a different time, and it was...
Agreed.
Because hashtag what?
Honey, if you're in the final 6 and you have a hidden immunity idol and you say this is the most comfortable I've ever been, I'm still like, you didn't say that tribal council. It's final 6.
Right. I could have the immunity necklace at final 6 tribal and I would not feel comfortable because he didn't say safe, he said comfortable.
Exactly. So I feel like that was probably from the round he won immunity, or I don't know, maybe at the merge because he was like, no one's angry at me or wanting to vote me out because I'm not a threat. So I found it interesting. I don't really remember any of the questions that Jeff asked or any of the, there wasn't any whispering again, which again, I did not mind that there was no.
It was a lot of talk with Denise eventually about how people feel like she was just ready to let go, and it almost seemed like she was kind of laying down and saying, you know, it's me. And she kind of, you know, stepped up a little bit and was like, it's not that I'm okay with going. It's that I'm exhausted of the constant ridiculousness that the game has been, you know, and if it is me, I want to go home with a full belly, blah, blah, blah. She mentions the hashtag that we see in the beginning of this episode, the endure and let go. At this point, I'm convinced, fuck, that's full circle. It's Denise. Denise is gone because that's how it works.
I was convinced it was Denise.
Thankfully, 4-2, it is Nick. So we end up with the final 5 of Denise, Michelle, Sarah, Ben, and Tony. And we still have like 20 minutes of episode left, which is fantastic because we're going to get an Edge of Extinction returnee.
Okay.
Except we're not.
Right? Oh, my heavenly Buddha. Can we talk about the whole Edge of Extinction? And it was, I actually kind of had like a little bit of a, it almost reminded me of Rites of Passage from like earlier seasons of Survivor, where basically like the final 3 or final 4 in some seasons pass by the torches of people that have been voted out. And you kind of see like what the experience has meant to them. And before I mention one of the ones that really stuck out to me, it was very interesting just kind of seeing that dynamic and watching how everyone was prepping to go into that. I think the one that kind of hit me the most was surprisingly Amber Mariano's kind of like, I hate this place. This place is horrible. I've been here for a month. I'm over it. But I also know I'm going to miss it. And I think if anything, that's almost, I think, the way that I'm probably going to reflect and think back on the season once it ends. And I think it's almost like I keep using the word love letter whenever I describe like Redemption Island, because I think Redemption Island was Jeff Probst's love letter to Rob Mariano because he needed Rob to have a win. But I think that was almost just like, this is so crazy without even meaning to. It's like, this is so crazy. This is so nuts. But also, this has been like my life for 30 plus days. And there was almost like a sense of finality to it that I almost was just like,
yeah,
all the feels that I was not expecting from them.
That was actually like I had 2 takeaway notes from what happened at Edge, but that was number 1. That for me was probably the confessional of the season. And it's very surprising that it came from Amber, who, you know, was the second person there. But
I need you and I to stop being the same person because I'm officially grossed out. Continue.
It was really fantastic. I think we saw, you know, Amber has always been a person that I think people root for a little bit, but no one's ever like, oh my God, Amber's my favorite player. You know, some people might, and that's great. I remember in Australia, I really cheered for Amber, but that was also because she was from Pennsylvania, so it's not fair. But
Might have been
Uh, a little bit biased, but I also liked her. I thought she was like a likable person, but not somebody that you'd really be like, oh my god, I'm all in for this person. And we didn't get a lot of Amber this season, even on Edge. It was sort of watered down. But I'm glad that she got that moment with that confessional because it was really important, I think. And what you said was perfect about it. It really capped the season. I'm really cheering. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, you mentioned you had two, and I was just gonna make a guess at your second one because it was my second thing that stood out to me. But go ahead and say it.
I'm really cheering for Natalie here, obviously, going in. We start to see a montage of the players. We see everybody at Edge. I can't remember if we see Adam talk. I think we do. But I recall seeing everybody else. Maybe not Sophie or Adam. I can't remember. But pretty
Sophie, and I remember that because I was upset about it.
Yeah, okay, so we missed Sophie and Anna, but I think we saw everybody else, and a few people talking about the advantages that they're buying going into the end. And Natalie, I'm dropping my buff for Natalie because she freaking unloads 14 fire tokens like the queen that she is. And one of the most powerful moments of Edge for me, Natalie, it's probably like such an emotional topic for her to have been there for as long as she has and worked as hard as she has, and she can only go into the game with one immunity idol if she makes it, and she's going to buy 3 advantages, and she decides to buy an idol and gives it to Tyson. And this moment was really powerful because we often see Tyson being incredibly stoic. I mean, at moments where he's almost broken, he still kind of holds it together for the most part. But he's really started to like well up when Natalie gave him the immunity idol in case he gets back into the game. That was just a really powerful moment for me. What was your? What did you think it was going to be?
Again, we're the same person, and it's so weird. But that was also my second kind of takeaway from the Edge of Extinction. I love Natalie, and she very seldomly does anything that just makes you go, but why?
Mm-hmm.
I was so livid, not really. I was so emotional and so, oh my ever loving Jesus. It's like if you ever don't give a hidden immunity idol to somebody, and I guess it makes sense that it's an idol as opposed to an advantage.
Yeah, she wasn't giving somebody a chance to beat her.
That's the grace that I should give Natalie, is it's like she only is helping Tyson if he makes his way back into the game.
Right.
That being said, unless the strategy was, hey, let me overwhelm this person with emotion so that he does not perform well on the challenge, because we already know that Tyson can perform under pressure. We're already fully aware of that fact. So the fact that she did anything to help him, or I think I wasn't upset about the idol. What upset me was the peanut butter situation.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised about the sharing of the peanut butter.
And to me, I almost was just like, I wonder if the edit was just Natalie shares peanut butter with everybody, but we only see her sharing peanut butter with Tyson. Because to me, I was like, the man can perform under pressure. Why are you going to help give him a leg up in a challenge that that he's already more than capable of doing? He's already going to get an advantage in the challenge.
That's fair. To that point, here we go, Ryan, again with conspiracies and subtext and things like that. We recall Tyson bought peanut butter in the past. I think there's a strong possibility either Tyson has shared his peanut butter with Natalie before, and it might have been them sharing back. But I also noticed, because I had to go back and rewatch for the fantasy leagues that I run to give points, because anybody that buys an advantage gets a point. So Natalie has 3 points from the challenge advantages, but Tyson, I am pretty sure, won a fire token from the last challenge that they did on Edge where they had to run back and forth.
Right.
But when it popped up with how many tokens he has, it said 0. Now, everybody else that had tokens that was going to buy a challenge advantage, it still said that they had 2 and this and that. So I think what possibly happened was that Tyson might have given Natalie enough fire token. Maybe he had 1 fire token and she was 1 token shy. So he gave her a fire token and they shared some peanut butter and then she gave him the idol. Maybe that was kind of like Because if you're Natalie, you got to look at it from the aspect of, these people on Edge obviously don't want the game to be super predictable. So someone going back in from Edge with an idol is the best thing. And the 3 people with the best shot are the person with the most advantages, which is Natalie, and the 2 people who both either almost made it back in or did make it back in last time, which would be Rob and Tyson. Rob already has an idol, Natalie has an idol, and now Tyson will have an idol. So the 3 of them have the best shot at going back into the game and shaking up the game.
I got it.
So sharing peanut butter with Tyson, yeah, why would you do it? But also, if Tyson's token is the thing that helped her buy the peanut butter, or if he got her back in the past, then maybe it's just fair play out of it.
Well, I hadn't considered that Tyson might have shared his peanut butter with Natalie, and that's a very fair assessment. And I didn't even notice. It's definitely a did you notice moment. The fact that Tyson showed up as having 0 despite being one of the players who did the running with the coconut thing and won it. So you're right. That is absolutely interesting. Possibly they just didn't have enough time to show that Tyson had so many tokens and was just like, I'm going to buy peanut butter again. Who knows? I think for me, like sharing it with Tyson, I was just like, if Tyson gets back in the game, he'll obviously have earned it because he doesn't have nearly the advantages that Natalie does. That being said, I don't want to see, of all the players that could get back into the game, Tyson is probably in my bottom 3, not because I dislike Tyson, but just because I'm like, he got back into the game, lasted a little bit, did what he was going to do, and then got voted out. I want to see someone else come back into the game.
Right. I mean, I think whoever it is, I just hope it's somebody that has an idol. But obviously, I have preferences on who I really want it to be. I really want it to be Natalie. And here's the moment we arrive at that I think we're going to argue about. And I think we're both going to be in agreement that probably if we could pick 3 people to come back from Edge, it would be some combination of Natalie, Sophie, maybe Parvati or Yul, or that's who I would be inclined to pick. I feel like
4 you just mentioned and Kim are my.
Oh, and Kim. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting that Kim is there. I would love to see Kim come back. I'm sorry, but obviously, whoever comes back, I want them to come back with the information from the jury that this person is a front runner for the game. Do yourselves a favor, change up the game, and I want that to happen. And whether it does happen or not, I want people to be compelled by that argument, because that should be what Edge is about. I think if you're going to have that twist, obviously it makes sense for people to go, okay, yeah, we have to make this move. But I think what we're going to argue about, because earlier you mentioned that we are Survivor fans, we're old school Survivor fanatics, purists, if you will. This episode, I changed my mind. That I think that a person that returns from Edge of Extinction should have the right to win the game. And I only make the argument for this reason, because if Natalie does return to the game and makes the finals, obviously I would love to see her win. And I don't necessarily think it's fair to the players that have played the game of Survivor, but, and it's a big but, Natalie has survived. It's a big in. It's a big but. Natalie has survived the entirety of the game on the Edge of Extinction.
Yeah.
And the game is about outwit, outplay, and outlast. And Natalie has managed to do all of those things while on the Edge of Extinction in such a dominant force that I don't think anybody could have possibly predicted or expected for a player who has been taken out of the game to do. And if this were a season that did not have pre-existing relationships, I would say, doesn't matter. Sorry, girl. But to be put on a tribe where you can't control who knows who came into the game with what agreement with who, there may have never been a shot for Natalie to survive based on her initial first tribe, unless she found an idol and played it. We don't know. We have to assume that it's a possibility. So if that is in fact the reality, and that Natalie was screwed from the jump as soon as her tribe lost immunity, and there pretty much wasn't anything that she could have done from it, then we see that one of two things happens, right? In Survivor, you either have to work around the twists and, accept the twist as it is, work around it, etc., or you fall victim to it. And, the two obstacles are the twist and the players in the game. So whereas Natalie may have fallen victim to the players in the game, she managed to dominate the twist, and if she comes back, then she has shown her ability to adapt to the game that she had to play in a fashion that allowed her to come back with an idol by so many advantages that nobody could beat her.
Yep.
And we assume, she has a shot to make it to the end, maybe taking out Tony on the path, having a resume. And I don't count fairness in being able to build a bond with a jury for 30 days. I don't think that's fair.
No.
But I also don't think that the jury will vote based on that. I really don't. I don't think the jury's going to go, well, we became besties over 30 days, so I really respect your game. I think they're going to give it to, no, you kicked ass. Like, you actually kicked ass, and that's fair.
Yeah.
I think if she makes a final three with like a Ben, maybe a Denise, maybe a Michelle, some combination of that, it could be an argument to make. And I'm not going to take that away from her. So I am actually throwing my chips in on Natalie having the second best shot to win the game if she returns to the game.
Okay.
And that's just my spiel.
I gotta be honest, I love your spiel. I think you make a lot of valid points. I don't necessarily agree with every point, but I think if a case were to be made was to be made for any player on Edge of Extinction to come back and win, if anyone tried to explain to me why a player should win from Edge and they didn't choose Natalie, I literally listened to be polite. And even then, I half listen and half think of my grocery list for later that day. Purely because I love Natalie. And I got to be honest, and this is the hypocrite in me. If Natalie came back from Edge of Extinction and won, I wouldn't be mad about it. But that being said, my inherent problem with Edge of Extinction is you literally have, and especially in Natalie's case, she had over 30 days to bring people in, and not to discredit it, because I'm sure it was probably hard for some players, especially the ones that voted her out. When people come in, you have the opportunity to say, hey, I know it sucks, you've been voted out, have some rice, have some coconuts. And she has the opportunity to talk to people, help them walk through whatever PTSD they might have from the game or being voted out. Since most of the people only played once, like the Sophies, the Kims, the Adams, they played one time, never got voted out this time. She's kind of like able to be there in a way that players in the game don't get the opportunity to do. And that was my big issue with Edge of Extinction the first time they did it. And again, I'm not going to be upset if Natalie wins, but that is something that's going to make me go, when people say Natalie shouldn't have won because of Edge of Extinction, I'm not going to tell them that they're wrong, but I'm also not going to tell them that I'm upset that she won.
Yeah. And I think I agree. I think Natalie winning, if she returns from Edge, would be like the nail in Edge of Extinction's coffin, but it would also be the thing that makes fans go, well, I guess, yeah, more so than Chris's win. People are outraged about it, and they should be. But I think
sorry, go ahead.
No, just because Chris, at that point, there's no strategic gameplay going on Edge of Extinction. There's, it's literally just let's sit on an island for however many days. There wasn't any competition to do certain things, and It's a very different game on Edge than it was that season.
Exactly. I think that's, to your credit and to your argument, I think that's the big difference between Natalie and versus Chris, is the fact that Natalie proved time and time again she had the athleticism to play the game and to try and utilize the twist to her advantage. She had the mental strength to do that. And if anyone was going to like break down and be like, I've been out here for 2 weeks, I'm never going to win if I get back into the game, I'm going to raise this mask and go hang out with Sandra. If anyone had the right to do that, it was going to be Natalie, if not Amber. So the fact that she didn't, I will never take away anything from Amber. I'm sorry, from Natalie. I'm not really going to take anything away from anybody, unless like Michelle or maybe Ben wins. And even then, Michelle's slowly growing on me, but not to the point where I want to see her win or I think she should win. That being said, yeah, I agree that it would probably be the nail in the coffin for Edge of Extinction, just because I feel like it would be one more notch to just prove if you have the opportunity to hang out with your fellow jurors in a hey, we need to vote together, or hey, I just stabbed you in the back, or yeah, I stabbed you in the back earlier in the game, but we've had 2 weeks to get over the fact that I stabbed you in the back, so what's the problem? It's like when you're a juror and it's like, well, I've got 3 people, 2 of which stabbed me in the back or 2 of which I'm angry at because of something that happened. and the third of which was part of the same thing that got me voted out. But we've had the opportunity to kind of like gloss that over and be chill with it. Yeah, I'm that person who's like, to me, it's an imbalance, and it's an important imbalance, which is why I'd give it to Natalie purely because of how hard she has worked and how she's had to think on her toes and how consistently week after week she has done so. So I agree with you. I'm sorry because I feel like you were so looking forward to us disagreeing on this topic. And for the most part, I agree with you. That being said, I think the hypocrisy on my side is probably just the fact that I'd be okay if Natalie did it. One, because Natalie worked her ass off in a way that Chris, whatever his last name is, didn't have to. And also, so if somehow magically it'd be like Denise, Natalie, and I don't know, like Michelle at the end, and like Natalie or Denise, any combination of Natalie and Denise get first or second, I have no complaints. But I also know that's never going to happen. We're talking a lot of hypotheticals, and as much as we're talking about Natalie, I will laugh my ass off if she's not the one to get back in the game.
Well, so for all of that being said, I actually don't think that Natalie makes final travel even if she gets back in, though. I think she probably goes down in the fire making challenge. I feel like Ben is going to be put to that fire making challenge because everyone knows he can win it.
Wouldn't it be fascinating if Ben gets put back in the fire making challenge and loses?
Wouldn't that be like almost as satisfying as Adam's demise? Like
It would literally be a toss up between Adam getting voted out and Nick being voted out, Ben losing a fire making challenge.
And
that would literally be like I think all three of those would probably make my top 5 favorite Survivor moments of all time. Very much behind I will always wave my finger in your face.
To be fair, also, because we've had such terrible moments from the editors where they keep doing that to us, like showing so much of Adam, and then finally Adam gets the demise that we've been waiting for. And same with Nick being like, this is the best position I've been in all game, and he finally goes. And, you know, like, I feel like maybe the editors will finally give us the payoff we want by pointing out how much of a jerk Ben was being to Jeremy, and then Ben, like, volunteers to do the fire making challenge, and then loses and gets 4th place. Wouldn't that be the most fantastic thing?
I'd be more so than any other factor of season 40. I feel like that would be the love letter that Jeff Probst writes to the fans.
I would forgive everything that happened to let Tony win the game so easily. I would forgive all of it if Ben, but only if Ben volunteers. If Ben just gets put in the fire making challenge and loses, it's fun, but it's not the most fun. But if he volunteers for it, I'm here. You know what, Jeff Probst? I'm going to let you get away with saying this is the greatest season of Survivor ever because you're wrong. But if Ben volunteers for fire making challenge and loses it, I'm not going to be mad at you saying that statement. You're just still going to be wrong.
Here's the trick about that. And the only reason why I'm worried about the end of the season, or the reason why I think Tony absolutely wins, because that's the edit. That's already the edit. But the reason why I'm absolutely convinced that he does is Jeff Probst wouldn't be saying that this is the greatest season of Survivor ever if after the edit Denise has gotten, which is basically a purple edit, if she came out of nowhere and won the season, he would never say it was the greatest season.
The only way he would say it about any of those people is if Sarah beats Tony. He's not going to say anybody else is the greatest ever.
Exactly. If Ben wins, he might say it if Ben wins just because he seems to love Ben, which is why they introduced the fire making challenge without warning in the final 4 of his season, which I was like, okay. So he might say that about Ben. He'd possibly say that about Sarah. I definitely think he'd say it about Tony. I don't think he'd say that if Michelle won. I don't think he'd say that if Denise won.
No.
And the only other way that he would say that would be if the person who came back from Edge of Extinction won, because he can't be like, oh, this is an okay season.
I mean, to be fair,
I feel that the ending of the season is adequate. If he said anything mediocre like that, I don't think he would say it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he just said the greatest season ever. It may not be that the ending is the greatest ever, but I feel like it needs a great ending. And, everyone knows that the Survivor fan base is like 40% Sandra, 40% Boston Rob, and like 20% Tony or some combination of that. And like there's no middle ground. Like that's where all the casuals fall. So obviously seeing Boston Rob basically being a 2-time winner and having won All-Stars and then getting a whole season created for him to win Redemption Island, and then Tony winning twice and Sandra winning twice, it'll be Jeff Probst's little perfect Hall of Fame. So
exactly.
Unfortunately, our girl Denise has no shot. But if she makes final 3, I'm gonna be a happy boy.
I'm gonna be thrilled if she makes it, just because Denise is gonna be able to be like, I have played twice and I have been voted out. Never.
I've been to more tribal councils than you could imagine.
Out of all the people who have played Survivor twice, no one has been to more tribal councils than I. Suck it. And that's just, that, if anything, is just the love letter I want to send to CBS, where I'm just like, I'm not saying you have to make an argument why everybody who goes to the end has a chance of winning, but you got to do better than, you just have to do better.
It has been, I mean, we get a little bit of in the final recap. And I saw Rob Sesternino ask this question, and it's fair. Let's just bring it up for a second. He said, like, I'm really glad that Survivor posted that 5-minute season recap for all the people who haven't watched this season at the end of an hour and 52-minute episode. So, like, why are we getting a recap at the end of this episode? We don't need a recap. We've watched the season. We know what has happened. We just watched 2 hours of it. I was very confused. So, like, yeah, they do that thing where they're like, oh, this is this person, and they might have a shot, even though I know it don't. I don't know.
I think they probably did it at the end of this episode, so that starting next episode, I mean, we'll see when it actually airs. I think when they get into the next episode, it's, okay, Nick just got voted off, let's go. Because normally Ben, the former winner who came back with a chip on his shoulder about blah, blah, blah. Denise, the person who went to every tribal council, who slayed the queen, and did this, all in Jeff Probst's voice that I'm incapable of doing. They normally do that at the beginning of the finale. And I think the reason why they did it at the end of the penultimate episode was so that we can jump into the finale and just go, let's dive in, let's do this.
Fair. I mean, and they only have 3 hours, I think, with a reunion included. So they need to truck. Like, we should be getting like 5-minute Edge of Extinction challenge, 10-minute strategy. Like,
yeah, I knew they also needed to start on a cliffhanger as well, which is we're getting ready to do the Battle Back challenge. So let's see it.
Like, I get that, but like, Survivor is a cliffhanger. You know what I mean? Like, it's always, if we know who's in the final 6, or if we don't, we're still gonna be like, who's gonna leave next?
Right. I think I kind of like how I don't know how long ago it was that they took out the intro.
Yeah.
To show all the players with their pictures and things like that. They did away with that ages ago. And I think the reason why they did that at the end of this episode is that literally when the next episode starts, it goes, challenge, person gets back into the game, let's go. And if for whatever reason Tony ultimately wins the season, I actually appreciate the fact that they're doing that, because I'm like, let's not beat around the bush. Let's not spend time in the finale wasting time with things we already know. Let's just jump right in. So I didn't mind it so much personally.
I did.
You look lovely, by the way.
Thank you. All right. So I don't think I have anything else. Do you have any other final thoughts?
The thing, I don't necessarily think that we glossed over it. I feel we keep talking. I think you and I are both kind of resigned to the notion that Tony's going to win this season, and he might. But what I found interesting, and it might just be a red herring, which I wouldn't put past CBS, the fact that when Jeremy got voted off, he was like, who was it? And then Tony's like, it was me. When Jeremy was like, it was a mistake, or whatever it was that he said, I felt 2 ways about that. One, I was like, oh, maybe we're setting ourselves up for a bitter jury situation. But also, I feel like this is mildly BS, because how many times would Jeremy have gone home had Tony not put his neck out before them, or how he would have used Michelle's idol when he wouldn't have needed to? So for me, I was almost just like, I obviously don't know everything that happened, but I am that person that kind of looks at Jeremy going, I'm sorry, you had an idol played on you earlier in the game. You had Tony protect you multiple times. And I'm like, I'm sorry, do you feel as though a single person in this game owes you a thing? Because I'm getting the impression you feel as though people owe you something. So, and maybe it's because Jeremy relayed information to Tony multiple times where Tony might have been in danger. Tony's been immune for 3 rounds, so I don't necessarily see how that could be the case. But I found that to be very, very interesting. And I feel like it seems as though it's Tony's game to lose right now, but I feel like if Tony loses the game, it's because of what Jeremy said, and if for whatever reason if someone comes back, if they massage Tony's ego the right way, maybe they get him into a false sense of security, or maybe they use that to go, hey, Tony, everyone's talking about how they want Sarah to go to the final 2, even though I'm guessing the jury is talking about how they want Tony to win. And if that happens, Tony can be like, well, I'm going to mount a mutiny against Sarah. And then the same person that puts that in Tony's head can go, hey, Sarah, Tony's trying to get you out.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I found that to be very interesting. And I'd love to say that that's somehow going to tie into either maybe Jeremy just doesn't vote for him, but part of me wants to think there's going to be some to that, or somehow that's going to affect at least some of the strategy that happens in the finale. Part of me also just thinks, they don't want him to make it seem too obvious that Tony's going to win.
Yeah, I kind of think, honestly, I don't think there was much substance to that statement. I sort of viewed it as like kind of a Jeremyism. Like, remember when I think Kimmy like flipped on him or something?
Kimmy.
And it was like, how dare you? I think that's just sort of, and I love Jeremy, but I feel like that's kind of just a Jeremy, like,
it's kind
how
of
dare you make that move on me? Like,
yeah, I think if anything, it got the wheels rolling in my head. Like, we as the audience are like, hey, Tony should win, but maybe, I don't know. Every once in a while, I feel like this is the player that's going to win. Like, I knew Final 9 that Tommy was going to win Island of the Idols. I had no question. When he did, I didn't even watch the reunion because I was just like, and it's like watching a horror movie and knowing within 10 minutes who the killer is. And then as soon as they say, it's me, and then it's like, it's like you don't even want to hear the explanation behind it because you're just like, this wasn't exciting because I knew it was going to happen. So yeah, so part of me is almost just like, maybe it's me desperately holding on to hope that Tony doesn't win, or maybe Tony just gets taken out and then Jeff Probst can spend 10 minutes gushing over how amazing Tony played at the finale. Who knows? I'm excited going into the finale. I think even though the last couple episodes have been a little lackluster with the exception of the most recent one, the editing seems to be very much supporting that Tony wins. I'm not mad. I think overall, there are elements of the season that were very, but I also think there have been a lot of great moments, and I think it's been fun watching many parts of the season play out the way that it did.
yeah, I mean, I think I'm not thrilled if Tony wins, and it's more so because I feel like there were a couple of times where it was really excellent gameplay on his part, and more often than not, it was a lot of people just kind of not being perceptive to the threat that Tony poses, which is just a little bit disappointing. But, you know, it goes both ways. Because as much of a threat as Tony can be, you can say that about almost anybody else. I just don't like seeing it be sort of like a cakewalk. And I'm not saying he hasn't had to work for it, but like, to have a hidden immunity idol in your pocket for this long and not have to play it and not even have to worry about playing it, like, I'm not saying it's bad gameplay on his part. It's just disappointing as a fan. Because I don't think that the level of gameplay that we saw this season was consistent enough to be like, he's the greatest of all time. But anywhere I've looked, that's all that anybody is saying. And like, as somebody who does not subscribe to the train of thought that Tony was the best winner ever in his first season because he had a super idol, I similarly think that there have been players with greater wins than we will see from this season, no matter who takes it, honestly. So,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so keep holding on to hope. In the words of Wilson Phillips, hold on, because if Tony ends up getting 6th place, you will hear me shriek from Florida.
There's something that you said, and you made a lot of amazing points, and I agreed with them. There was one thing that you said that made me go, oh, the thing I was going to say is greatest is subjective. Mm-hmm. It really depends upon the traits of a winner that you appreciate. There are people that will argue that Sandra's the greatest player purely because she's the only player to win twice. Mm-hmm. And she didn't get voted out until her 3rd time playing. And it's like, who else can say that? No one. Sandra's the greatest. Then there are people that say that Sandra's a horrible player because they value, in Pearl Islands, they would have valued either a Burton or a Johnny Carson.
Dominance.
Or what?
Dominance.
It's like they want people to play a very outspoken, a very conspicuous, a very dominant game. And I think Jeff Probst assumes that the fans, and maybe the majority of fans, want a game like Boston Rob in Redemption Island or Tony in Cagayan. And maybe he just feels that no one really cares for a game where it's literally like, this is a social game, and my social game is literally listening to you sink yourself and then using that information without causing a scene, without making anybody cry, and without any of that, and just going, thank you, great, I feel fine, let's just vote the way you want to vote, and then turning around and being like, we're voting him out because he wants to vote for you, and I like you better.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's and whenever anyone says, "Oh, this is the greatest player of all time," even if it's a player I like, I'm always, usually going to be that person to go, "Well, that's one way to view it." So it's like, I think if anything, the only person I'm ever going to adamantly disagree with in arguments like, "Oh, this is the greatest player of all time," I'm sorry, I'm that person that's going to go, I give more stock to players that, like one player who got first place their first season, and then like a Sophie or a Kim, I'm gonna give more clout to that. And let's say, for example, Tyson gets back into the game and win. I'm gonna go, he made jury his first time, pre-jury the second time, won his third time, won the fourth time. I'm like, he's got a 50% record, which almost everybody who played this, everyone who played in this season, like, I think almost half of them, they can say it was my second time playing.
Right.
So my average is 50%. If you let me play a third and a fourth time, I could potentially win as well. So I think that's where the season kind of made a lot of missteps. I feel there should have been more winners involved who had only played the one time, if not like max be their third time. But they were never going to have a winner season without including Sandra and without including Boston Rob. That being said, it's like, even if Boston Rob were to win, it'd be like, I feel like it's easier to win the game when you've played 5 times than when you've only played twice.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe that's ignorant, but yeah, I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Descends from soapbox.
Look, I wouldn't stay so long on my soapbox if I didn't feel that I was accurate.
Fair enough. All right. I think that's everything we've got.
I literally think this is probably longer than the episode itself. That being said, that's nothing new. Thank you, Ryan, as always, for being such an amazing co-host and for keeping us on track. And also I like that this episode, even though we didn't necessarily agree all the times, it seems like we both kind of had moments that went, hadn't considered that. If you, as any of you viewers, watch and say, hey, you guys didn't talk about this, or this is something to consider, or this is how I feel, obviously, please leave a comment, please send a DM, whatever they call them on YouTube, I have no idea. But no, thank you, Ryan, as always, for being so amazing and so spot on with your observations. You're amazing.
Of course. Thank you so much. It's been a really fun season. I mean, next week will be our finale episode, but I have a feeling this won't be the last that you'll see of us talking about either this season or future seasons. I think there's plenty more content that we can bring all of our 4 fans. So
those 4 fans are dedicated, and I am not mad at those 4 fans. So.
Listen, my good friend Derek today texted me and said, hey, Ryan, I deactivated my Facebook, but I still want to follow along. Can you send me the link? And I was like,
Derek, we love you.
So I think we have plenty of stuff to talk about in the future, whether it's a recap of performances from players this season, or, you know, there's many topics we get into sometimes about, you know, Dawn versus Cochran, who deserved to win, and things like that. I think there's a lot of stuff that we could eventually talk about. So this may not be the last that you'll be seeing us drop our buffs.
Yeah, maybe we'll make like a wheel of seasons and then just spin it, and then whichever it lands on, we'll just do an assessment of said season.
If you can make a wheel, I will death drop on camera.
Okay, so here's the thing. I will buy a wheel and say that I made it purely because I want to watch you death drop.
I can't make shit, so I ain't making a wheel.
I'm not making a wheel. Anyway, thank you guys so much. It's been so much fun. Next week is our finale. I can't believe I'm impressed and amazed that we made it through an entire season. This is the first time I've successfully done it. Drag Race Season 8, I think I made it to Final 6 before we stopped with my friend Domo. And then I think Season 9, we made it to Final 6 or 7 before we stopped. So the fact that we literally did every episode, I'm like, yes, it's an improvement.
We hung on. It got close sometimes. We like barely squeezed an episode in there sometimes, but
I think there were days we literally filmed the morning of an episode before or for the episode from the previous week. So I'm
So
impressed.
it is hard sometimes with everything going on in the world and being back to work or before with work schedules and stuff, being 3 hours apart and knowing that we're gonna, because you don't see, we talk about this except for like when I have to work early in the morning, which has been the last couple of weeks, but when we do these, we already rant your ears off and then we talk for another like 3 hours afterwards. So like we take a lot of time to do these and then decompress after doing them.
I
So
mean,
it's hard to coordinate.
I honestly do it because Ryan Willie has like one of the most, it's like smooth jazz, the voice.
I hate my voice, so you're the nicest person for saying that. I hate my voice.
No, I feel like if I were to be on Big Brother or Survivor, 120%. We have to end this video, but I'm gonna say this while we're on camera. If I were on Survivor or Big Brother, if you were there, aside from just us being friends, I think you'd be the one where you'd say things like, Alex, I appreciate you and I value you as an ally, but you need to cut the shit as you are trying to cuss out these players we're in this game with, because I don't need them targeting you because they know that you and I are in cahoots together. So I'm gonna need you to breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, and shut the freak up. So, but it's, a lot of people would say that and I'd be like, absolutely not. I'm over it, let's go. But it's something in your voice. It's like, it's calming. It's got like a nasal quality to it. I don't know.
I do have a very nasally voice. I would have to be like, Alex, I know you want to blindside Jeff Probst, but you're not allowed to.
I'd be the one just like, I would get in trouble. If I went on Survivor, I would think I would be the Greg Buis of my season. I would go up to that booth and write Jeff Probst on a piece of parchment and throw it in there. And then they said, Alex, I'd be like, what? And then we actually need you to write down a player in the game. And I'm like, who did I write down? Jeff Probst. I didn't write down Jeff Probst. I'm going to need a television a la Rob Mariano and Sandra in some confessional booth that shows that's who I voted for. I didn't write that. I personally make it my mission to piss off Jeff Probst. Me saying this in here is probably going to disqualify me from ever being on the show. But just messing with that man would bring me so much joy, especially if I got voted out first. Small victories. Anyway, this has been like an extra 10 minutes. You guys are amazing. Thank you for watching. We love you. Amazing. Bye. Thank you, Ryan. You're awesome.
Thank you guys.